not set up for crashing disappointment after all of that's been said. And I have to say that it is absolutely true that I remain the most disappointing person I know. So I just hope that I won't go down in your books as the same. So, because tonight is a blended talk, it's a community talk, it's an academic talk, I'm going to afford myself a little bit more liberty in my introduction than I did this afternoon. And that is, I always need to begin from a default place of gratitude. And of course, Muslim talks, we always begin Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God whose love and mercy, we're going to talk more about these words as we go forward, allows us to be here without guards at the door, without the threat of anything, any projectile coming through the roof, to have a discussion, an honest discussion, a self-critical discussion, a challenging discussion about faith and what it means to live a faithful life. And so I'm grateful that we are in this safe place and that we're able to have this conversation. I'm grateful to Brother Dr. Adnan for inviting me to be here. Grateful for the Department of History at Queen's and the Department of Philosophy at Queen's. Grateful to the Muslim community, and I'm profoundly grateful to each and every one of you, because we know that the days of our lives are numbered. The hours of our lives are numbered, and you've chosen to take a few hours out of your life to be here tonight. And I hope and pray that what happens here tonight is both informative and transformative, and also a little bit medicinal for us as we think deeply, whether we embrace Islam as our faith tradition or whether we've just come here to try to gain some insight into what Islam is. Or maybe we've seen the rather shady-looking picture of the speaker, and we just want to make sure that nothing dangerous is going to be put on the table tonight. But I want to say thank you to you for being here tonight. And it would be wrong for me to begin without saying thank you to the one person whose sacrifices really purchased for me the time to be with you. And that is my wife, Peggy, who's stuck at home with 4 kids. The 5th one is already in the UK, so he's out of the house right now. But she's still got 4 who don't really understand how difficult it is. As they fight and whine and complain and fight some more and do everything they do, they really don't understand how difficult it is to manage as a single parent home. And tonight Peggy has to do that, and she does it so that I can be here with you. And it would be wrong for me not to honor her and to thank her for her sacrifice, which allows me to be here with you tonight. Finally, we are now in a moment where we are coming to terms. We haven't completely done this, but we are coming to terms now with the rather sobering fact that the land upon which we're having this conversation really doesn't belong to us. That the land upon which we're having this conversation was brutally taken from the indigenous peoples, whether by clever treaty or by force or through the annihilation of whole communities. And we want to honor them. We want to ask for God's blessings, even as we ask for God's blessings upon the prophets and upon the messengers and the beloveds of God. We want to ask for God's blessings to be upon them. We want to ask that what we do here tonight is worthy of their companionship and their esteem. We want to recognize them and we want to honor them. And we want to ask that what we do here tonight truly contributes toward a new reality, a new relationship, built upon equality, built upon compassion, built upon dignity and respect, and built upon our gratitude for the sacrifices that their communities have made, willingly and unwillingly, and continue to make, so that we might reawaken to the dignity, the sanctity of life, and the sacredness of this land, and the sacredness of one another. So we ask for God's blessings to be upon the indigenous peoples of this land and all indigenous peoples tonight. Tonight we're going to walk through a reintroduction to Islam. And the reason why I say a reintroduction to Islam is because sometimes we know a thing or we live a thing, and sometimes that thing becomes so familiar to us that we miss the chance to step back and to see it with new eyes. And I'm going to say some things tonight that you may not have heard a religious teacher say before. But as I say those things, we're going to walk through the rationale together. And we're going to try to begin to see Islam with new eyes. And so my first statement is that everything begins with love. And the reason why I say that is because, as you know, Arabic and Hebrew, two sister languages, sister peoples, every word boils down, or almost every word boils down to a three-letter equation, right? And the word I'm translating here is love, okay? Most of you have heard translated before as mercy. And that's not completely wrong, but I think we missed something very important. The three-letter equation here is ra, ha, mim in Arabic. In this order, in this direction, of course, as the Semitic languages always move away from the heart toward the heart, from right to left. And so, as I write this word, these three letters, ra, ha, mim, this is a code. This is an equation like all words in Arabic, and it has a core meaning. For example, the word kitab comes from the three-letter equation kaf, taba, kataba, which has a core meaning of writing. So we can get maktaba, library, from that. We can get maktub, letter, from that. We can get maktab, desk or office, from that. We can get all kinds of words generated from that same root, because that root has its core meaning of writing. Okay? The core meaning here, raham, is a body part. It's the womb in which all of us began life. And so when God describes God's self in the Quran as Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, okay, we're just making some letters, and Rahim, we can do that too. We're dealing with the same root. Ra, ha, mim, ra, ha, mim. And when God in the Quran says that God has written Rahmah, ala nafsihi, that God has written Rahmah upon God's self, it means that God has freely chosen to bind God's self with love, Rahmah. Because what does it mean then? When God linguistically connects God's own name, God's own attribute, to that body part, it means that this speaks to us about how God loves us, how God loves the creation. And it has everything to do with a mother's love. This is a maternal image. For all the people, even Muslims sometimes, who want to think of God as a big angry man, right? This is a mother's image, rahmah. It means it's unconditional love. It's nurturing love. It's protective love. That's what rahmah is. It feeds us, it protects us. It loves us without our having done anything. The way the mother loves her child without the child having done anything to deserve it other than to exist. Even we have a very strongly narrated and verified hadith tradition from the Prophet ﷺ. May God's prayers and blessings and peace be upon him. He said that the word in Arabic for womb is raham, because God is the Rahman. And so anyone who disrespects one is disrespecting or offending the other. So we have here this core idea of raham, love, rahmah, love. Just as wisdom, hikmah is the highest form of knowledge, right? Rahmah is the Quran's term for the highest form of love. Because this speaks to us about how God loves us. Right? It's the highest form of love in the Quran. And so I say that everything begins with love. Why do I say that? And I say that because in the 55th surah, the chapter of the Quran, which is the surah of the Rahman, the surah of the one who loves us like a mother. It begins, Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran, that the one who loves us like a mother is the one who made known this recitation of the Quran. So from Rahmah comes revelation and religion, prophecy. And then what does it? Khalaq al-insan. From Rahmah comes the creation of the human being. From Rahmah then comes the bayan, that which makes everything clear. Some scholars have said that refers to human speech. Some scholars have said that refers to human intellectual capacity. But whatever it is, let's say from that love comes the human ability to understand. Everything begins with love. And so I often tell people that if somebody comes to you, it doesn't matter how good their Arabic is, or how many hadiths they have, or how much Quran they're flinging at you and weaponizing. And young men especially need to hear this, because young men are the targets. Young men are like trying to deal with their own testosterone, and they know that something is wrong with the world, and they know that Muslims are suffering in different places, and somebody comes to them with this kind of religious teaching. Arabic, hadiths, absolute certitude, you've got a mission, you want to, this idea. I tell people that if, no matter how much Arabic they have, or how convincing they are, if you don't sense any rahmah in their speech, then it cannot be a religion. It cannot be. Full stop. Because the Quran says, even though in medieval Islam we have debates about whether God is free, does God have to take a virtuous person and award him paradise? Is it possible that God could take a sinner and award paradise? Is it possible that God could take a virtuous person and throw him into hell? The Mu'tazilites, who were rationalists and trying to make sense of everything, they said, no, God has to do what's fair. Because that makes sense. Because God is justice. But the opposing opinion, which won the day, said, no, God can do whatever God wants. God is God. God is just, but that doesn't mean I understand what justice is as it pertains to God. So if God, by the way, he would never do this, if God wanted to, he could take a virtuous person and throw him into hell, but of course he wouldn't do this, but he could. Because God is free, right? God's free. God is radically free. God isn't on trial. So God is not, we can't say that God has to do. God is not compelled to do anything. God is the compeller, a jabbar. God is the one who compels others, but God cannot be compelled. And yet twice in the Quran, it says that God has written rahmah upon himself. The himness here being metaphorical. Arabic, we don't have an it, right? So it has to be him or her. So this is a linguistic assignment of masculinity. It doesn't mean that God is man. But twice, it is written that God has written a rahmah upon God's self. So my first statement tonight is that everything begins with love. And we also should be reminded that the Prophet ﷺ, upon him be blessings and peace, and his family and all of his righteous and true companions and all of the messengers, he has something that we call a sunnah, a customary way of being. Right? And Muslims take him to be the uswa hasana, the beautiful role model, and so they like to dress like him, they like to wear their beard like him, because all of that to them is part of the sunnah. part of his way of being. And it's out of love, hopefully, that Muslims do that. And that's all good. But the Quran distills the entirety of the Sunnah in one sentence. Makes it very simple and very challenging. When the Quran says to him, مَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً, we have not sent you as anything but a token of this to the worlds, to everyone and to everything. And so I always tell, again, those same young boys, and all of us, we all need to be reminded, that before we make ourselves a poster boy or a poster girl for this religion, we need to go home and be a rahmah to our spouse. We need to go home and be a rahmah to our parents. We must go home and be a rahmah to people, or go out into the streets and be a rahmah to people who don't like us. People who don't like Islam. I've had so many people say, oh man, you seem like a nice person, but this religion of yours, man, you gotta rethink that. And I'm like, well, thanks for the tip, but let me know when you're ready to have that next coffee. But the idea here is that the entirety, before we, buy the leather socks, and I don't even know where you get those things, but anyway, before we do that, right, and we show the world that we're the poster boy or poster girl for this religion, this is the hard thing. The growing of the beard is not difficult, and the wearing of our clothes in a particular way is not difficult. But this is difficult. This is not easy. But this is what it means to be a person of the Sunnah. Not just for Sunni Muslims. I'm not saying it that way. All Muslims are people of the Sunnah, right? People who love the Prophet, people who follow in his way. So I'm not giving a Sunni talk tonight. I'm giving something deeper than that. Just a ground, foundational talk about something we need to, again, awaken to. And one of the things that we Muslims, I think, are asleep to is the fact that this is all about love, and it has only ever been about love. The reason why you and I exist is because God loved us. And even as my mother, a faithful Catholic woman, when I was a little boy, sick from school one day, but she came into the room and I had encyclopedias all over the floor, and I found the entry about ancient Greece, and I was crying, and she said, Timothy, what's wrong? And I said, God made a mistake, Mom. I was supposed to be there, right? In ancient Greece. These people are like me, right? And she assured me, no, Timothy, God doesn't make mistakes, so you're supposed to be here, right? But the idea is that this divine love is connected to the very essence of what it means to be a human being. Each one of us in this room is alive because God breathed God's own ruah into our form. God willed us, chose us to live. And that means that there is no human being in this room that is not deserving of dignity. I don't care who you love or how you love, right? I don't care what religion you believe in or don't believe in. I don't care any hurtful things that you may have said before you came to this talk tonight. The fact is that each one of us has been ennobled by this existence. And what that means is it means that we have an obligation as people who pray to the Rahman and the Rahim. If God is the one who loves us like a mother, if we came from the same Raham spiritually, then we have family obligations to one another, whether I like it or not. Whether you look like me or not. Whether you love like me or not. Whether you believe like me or not. And this is why when the Quran says that we're supposed to give to the orphans, it's not the Muslim orphans or the orphans that deserve it, it's just the orphans. This is very Abrahamic. It's very Jewish, it's very Christian, it's very Islamic, it's very divine. It's just the orphan, it's just the widow. It's just the one who is in need. Because these people are here because God has placed them here. They exist because God has willed their existence on purpose. No accidents. And they breathe because God breathed the ruach, the divine breath, into them. So we're back to this teaching, which is very Quranic. Some people say, oh, he's a former Catholic, he's talking Christianity in Islamic terms. No. As a Catholic, there's a lot of good stuff there too, but there was no Rahma in Catholicism, at least not the Arabic word. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't write the Arabic dictionary. This is foundationally Islamic Quranic teaching, and yet somehow, some way, on Fridays we're hearing about the permissibility of voting in Canada. Or we're hearing about, we spend more attention on fixing the roof or buying a bigger building. But we're not talking about this. And even these few verses where it says that God has written Rahmah upon God's self, this should have the entire Muslim world waking up with gratitude every morning. That no matter what we've done, God has written this love upon God's self. And it means that nothing can happen in our faith outside of Rahmah. Nothing. And then I also want to say that first, everything comes from love. Second, this entire religious project that we would call the Abrahamic religions, Millat Ibrahim, alayhi salam, that would include today Christianity, Judaism, Islam, that all of these traditions, and maybe more, but let's just focus on the big three right now, at least where we can stay kind of Near Eastern in our focus for the moment. But I would say that all of these religions are what I would call restorative vehicles. Okay, now let's explain that. A vehicle is something that moves you from one place to another place. It doesn't have to be motorized, doesn't have to be fancy. But restorative, it's about restoration. It's about regaining something that we've lost. Okay? There's a mystery when we talk about the human creation in the Quran, and it's the mystery of fi ahsani taqweem. This mention in the Quran that the human being was created in the most beautiful of all possible forms. And wonderfully, the Quran doesn't single out male or female. It's not just the men who are created in the most beautiful forms, even though there are a lot of men who want to believe that. Everybody, the human being was created in the most beautiful of forms. Right? And then something happened, and we were reduced ourselves to the lowest of the low. Right? So we have these extremes, this polarity in the Quran. We've got beauty, and then we've got the lack of beauty. All the Abrahamic traditions share this mythic idea. And I say mythic not to say it's not true, but it's outside of history. There's no way we can academically, scientifically verify this. And it's always tricky when we use our scriptures as documentary, historical documents. But the idea is that we have this idea that we came from a garden, right? And what does that garden represent? That garden represents that we were good with each other, that we were good with the creation, we were right with God. We were good. We talked to angels, we talked to God directly. There were no books, there was no religion. Van Morrison says, no guru, no method, no teacher, right? Just us in the garden. At that time, for all we know, I mean, at least the artists tell us that we weren't even wearing clothes. But we were good. Right? But then something happened and we were alienated from that being right with God, being right with each other, being right with the creation. Somehow we lost it. And then we have this dream of another garden. Right? The Garden of Paradise. So we've got this, so where we are right now is we're in this, what I call the world between the gardens. And this is where religion has a role to play. So do you think when the human being, the creature, is reunited with God, do we have the 5 times daily prayer? When you're in the next world, what direction do you face your prayer up? Right? Where's your qibla? If you're in the presence of God, there's no need for prayer or dietary laws or fasting. Religion no longer applies. That's the garden state, but that's not where we are. We're in this miserable, difficult, confusing world between the gardens. And it's here that religion has a restorative role. Again, going back to Surah 13, the Surah of the fig, right? That we created the human being in the most beautiful of all possible forms, and then we reduced him to the lowest of the low, except for those, right, who believe and do righteous, beautiful deeds. So there's this sense then that religion then becomes the way of, from going down here, getting back into the garden, getting back into a state of rightness. And so religion itself is not, the vehicle itself is not the goal. And the vehicle itself is not the God. The vehicle itself exists to take us from one place to another place. And Islam then is very much like the other revealed religions in that it offers a methodology. It offers a way. It includes fasting. It includes prayer. It includes almsgiving. It includes what we would call distributive justice, which means that even if you don't feel like giving, if you have more than enough and somebody else doesn't, that part of your surplus belongs to that brother or sister or that family, whether you feel charitable or not. Belongs to them. It's their right. And so this idea then of going from here to here means that we have a methodology, right? It's kind of like a madhab or a manhaj, or as the Quran calls it, a sharia. The sharia is not a law. It's such a, again, it's like translating this as mercy. It's not wrong, but it misses so much richness. Those of us who have studied Arabic may have learned that sharia is really, it's from the same root that we would use for the city streets, the shawari' outside. It means a pathway. It's an old desert word which was used to refer to the trampled path that the animals make on their way to water. Sharia is not a law. It's a way of walking. It's a way of being. It's a way of living. That's the idea. And when Maimonides was writing in Arabic, they say the greatest Jewish mind since the prophet Moses was the other Moses, Moses Maimonides. When Maimonides is speaking of the Jewish law in Arabic, he calls it Sharia. Right? When he's referring to Torah in Arabic, he says Sharia. It's the way. And when we talk about it in the desert, a way that leads to water, we're talking about a way that leads to life. It leads to restoration. It leads to life. And so when we talk about Islam then, Islam is a restorative mechanism. It's a restorative vehicle. And every part of that teaching is understood or intended to be understood as being medicinal, meaning it's good for you only if you knew. Right? It's better for you. Because everything then comes again as a token of rahmah. And yet, we have this idea of a God, like if somebody misses their prayer, of a God who's just like ready to punish, right? But the whole idea is that God doesn't need the prayer. God's not hungry because somebody didn't pray. Or God's not small because somebody didn't fast. God doesn't need any of that. As Rumi, one of our mystic poets, wrote, the one who is glorified in your prayer is not God. God is not glorified in your prayer. Sorry to pop your bubble. Right? The one who is glorified in prayer is the one who's doing the prayer. The prayer is given to you to glorify you, to make you better. So if you miss the prayer, it's not that God is there like ready to punish. This is a human projection upon God. It's not fair. It's cheap. It's bad. It's the fact that I've been given an opportunity and I missed my opportunity. Right? My kids can always tell if I've missed prayers. They're like, yeah, you seem kind of stressful, Dad. Right? I can feel it. I get stressed out. I can feel already my stress level being reduced when I'm saying my prayers and I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I can do this, right? I can face the day. I can, whatever it is, I can do this, right? But the longer I go without prayer, is the more frazzled I become, the more nervous and stressed out I become. It has nothing to do with the gallons of coffee I drink every day. But I just feel it. Because the prayer is not for God, the prayer is for me, like everything else. If we're going to understand it in the light of this rahmah, and in the light of this idea of restoration. So the journey to God should not ever be separated from my journey to me, as God created me to be. My journey to me as God is calling me to be. And that's a Timothy I haven't met yet. But that's a Timothy that is part of this divine call to go from here back to the mystery of the ahsan taqweem, in the most beautiful of forms. And so what I want to do is I want to challenge myself and challenge you and challenge all of us to change the way we think about what this Islam is. We think of it as a religion of Islam. Sometimes we think of it as identity, right? I am a Muslim and like high five, I'm like, part of the tribe. Whatever it is we think of it, but Islam is not that. Islam is understood this way. Islam is about the aspiration to become a restored human being. Islam is not who I am today. Islam is the person I aspire to become. One of the traditional teachings that have been used within our faith to facilitate this process of restoration is the meditation upon the divine attributes. Most Muslims just think the divine attributes are like decorations for the masjid, or for the mosque, or for the house, and they tell us something about God. But the spiritual practitioners within Islam, for more than 1,000 years, going all the way back even to the Prophet ﷺ, have talked about the attributes, each quality, as something that a human being should meditate on, and something that a human being should try to live. So Imam Ghazali, in his commentary on the 99 names of God, for example, will look at the name of God, Al-Mu'min. Now, for most people in the room, we use the word, who know Arabic, we use the word mu'min usually to mean a believer. But obviously God has nothing to believe in, right? So God isn't a believer. So Imam Ghazali again takes it back to the root, and he says, when it refers to God, al-mu'min means to the human being, the refuge, the safe space. God is the one to whom we run for safety. That is, God is al-mu'min. What Imam Ghazali says is that the very first step for a human being to begin, how shall I say, to begin not actualizing, mobilizing, I'm looking for a word, I'm getting old, it's not coming, but operationalizing, if that's what I was looking for, this word, is, it begins with you becoming, you keeping your neighbor safe from you. And then as you begin to protect other people from the harm that you might cause them, and we are soberly remembering that we often hurt the people that we love the most. But the idea is that to live within the attribute of al-mu'min means that we are constantly aware of our potential to harm others, and that we are constantly practicing vigilance to prevent ourselves from harming anyone else. And the more a human being begins to live within the attribute of al-mu'min, he says, then you begin to protect others from yourself. You begin to think of protecting the environment from the negative effects of your behaviors upon the environment. You might begin to think of protecting people living in sweatshops in Bangladesh by not buying clothes that are produced in conditions of slavery. You might become a mu'min for people because you start buying ethically sourced coffee so that you're not buying coffee which comes from slavery fields. Diamonds, whatever it is, chocolate, whatever it is. But it means that you begin to live with the ethic of protecting the environment, protecting the creation, and protecting other people. And gradually then that person, Al-Ghazali says, becomes a safe space. People come to him or come to her because they know that in their presence they will find safety. They will not be judged. They will be protected. And then the more a person grows in this attribute, the more of a safe space they become for others, a refuge they become. And Imam Ghazali says that each one of the attributes has a teaching like that for us. And what this is it doesn't mean we're trying to become spiritual, like super athletes. It means that this is helping us, guiding us, training us to become what it means to be a real human being again. Remember, the human being, according to the Quran at least, was created last in the creation. And the human being was created with a particular role in mind, to be the Khalifa, the caretaker of the creation on behalf of the true owner of the creation, God. And so, as human beings who have been given this charge, we have to stop just being the takers and start learning what it means to be a caretaker. It begins with ourselves and with those close to us, but it's about learning to live differently. Learning to love each other, learning to love the creation without thinking about what we're going to get back, but rather learning to love as God loves. So we're all kind of training in this schoolhouse of Rahmah. We remember that the Prophet said that none of you is a believer until and unless you love for your brother what you love for yourself. And I think we're on safe ground to say that he wasn't just talking about the boys, right? The idea is that when you learn to love another human being and put that human being on a level at least as high as you are to yourself. And if we're not able to do that, then we're not really believers. We're not really living out what this faith is supposed to be. So again, learning to love as God loves. We were born because of this, and our journey back to God is a journey of learning how to do this, how to emulate God's attributes. So when people ask me, so a lady at the cashier said the other day, she said, what's all this? You change yourself up. Like, what's all this? I said, well, I can only really feel free, right, unless I chain myself all up. I said, because each one of these represents the kind of human being I'm aspiring to become. And I need to be reminded of that. She was like, okay, whatever works for you, man. Right? But the idea here is that I need to be reminded. I need to remind myself about what I'm doing here. Right? And in that reminding, I remember that this journey to God is also a journey to me, as God created me to be. It's a journey of restoration. All of this means is that the human being is a kind of what I call in English a theocentric being, which means we are human beings, we are beings that are meant to have God in the middle. To have God in the middle. And one of the reasons why we pray 5 times a day, Imam Ghazali would say that every aspect of the prayer has a medicinal purpose. But one of the medicinal effects of the prayer is that it reminds us, no matter what we're doing in the day, it pulls us back and it reminds us, oh yeah, God is in the middle. This is about God. It's about my journey to God. It's about God. God is in the middle. And so part of the process of becoming a real human being is cleaning the heart out. Because our hearts are filled with all kinds of competing loves, all kinds of stuff. And one of the reasons why the mystics of our tradition compare the heart very powerfully to the Kaaba itself. The Kaaba is God's house, and it only works if it's empty. Right? The first thing that the Prophet did, ﷺ, when he returned to Mecca, his hometown, is he cleaned, well, not the first thing he did is he forgave everybody. Right? That's important. And then he went to the Kaaba and he cleaned it out with all the stuff that was packed in there. And the psychological and spiritual process of becoming a real human being is learning to clean the heart out. And it doesn't mean that we stop loving. It doesn't mean that we don't have a favorite TV show anymore. It doesn't mean that we stop loving coffee. God forbid. Thank God the fuqaha of medieval Islam didn't ban coffee. They were all drinking it probably when they were having the discussion. But thank God, right? It would have made my journey to this faith much more difficult. But, so it doesn't mean I stop loving those things. It doesn't mean I stop enjoying life. It doesn't mean, but what it means is that my priorities are clear. And that all of my loves are reflections of that one core love. And so it means that my heart has to be spacious, and it has to be a place that is reserved for God and for God alone. So we are theocentric beings. And the teaching of the divine attributes is that more than just being human beings that are supposed to have God in the middle, that we can never become God, of course, but we are meant to strive to be God-like in the way we live. God has written Rahmah ala nafsi. God has written love, this supreme form of love, upon God's self. Whenever I do a wedding, I say, okay, you both write Rahmah upon your hearts now. Right? Because if God has written Rahmah upon God's self, then we, in order to walk in this theomorphic way, the spirit of trying to be more godlike, we must write Rahmah upon our own selves. Which means that if there is something that I want to do, but it's lacking any Rahmah, I should never do it. I should never do it. Because the binding example is here. And if that's not enough, the Prophet is a Rahmah, nothing but a Rahmah for everyone and to everything. Okay, now it's reinforced. So if I want to follow in the footsteps of this guy, alayhi salatu wasalam, so I'm going to be like a what? A serial killer? What am I going to be? Right? No. We have to start living in the theater, in this mental theater of Rahmah. Or else none of this makes sense. If this religion is not about God's mercy, what's it about? What, flexibility in my back? Not getting enough sleep? What's it about? Right? It's about that process of restoration. And that restoration is the same thing as the return to God. Another lesson that we have to learn is that this is a journey that we can't make by ourselves. It's too hard. There's a beautiful line from a Sufi fable, written also in Persian in the 13th century, called The Speech of the Birds, Mantiq al-Tayr, where the leader, the king of birds, and each bird represents, of course, a human soul, a human heart, but the king of the birds said, look, I know the way to our king. I know the way. And I can show you the way, but I cannot go alone. It's a beautiful, poetic way of saying that we need each other. We need each other. And it's no wonder then that while this word comes from that idea of the love of a mother, a maternal image, our word for community also comes from a root which means mother. It's like it's like we are so difficult to teach. We are so dense. We are such bad students that it just keeps getting hammered into us. Rahmah, ummah. Like it's about love. It's about taking care of each other. Start taking care of ourselves. And I think it's I'm not a self-hating Muslim, but I think we have to be honest about the fact that we've been doing it badly. Look at us. Look at the poverty in Muslim-majority lands. I don't want to call them Islamic world lands because there's nothing Islamic. Sometimes people say they go to places, they see lots of Muslims but no Islam. I'm not going to say that, but I do say that we have these Muslim-majority countries where people are building parking garages for their car collections, and they have people starving on the streets. World hunger is not an unsolvable problem. Global poverty is not an unsolvable problem. Right? Racism, all forms of discrimination and denigration, these are not unsolvable problems. And these are not problems that exist in other communities more than they exist in our own. We have it. We have it all. How many poor, desperate Syrian mothers right now are walking the streets of Beirut, selling themselves to Muslims so that they can feed their children? How many? How many Syrian mothers are walking the streets of Istanbul doing the same thing, selling their bodies to Muslims so that they can feed their children? I think the numbers are beyond count, beyond imagining. And so I don't think it's a token of the fact that I'm a self-hating Muslim to say that we are not living up to these standards. And the solution is not getting a whole bunch of engineering degrees from Queen's University, and the solution is not everybody becoming accountants, right, or investment bankers. The solution is a reawakening to what our religion is really about. It's not about hell and hijab and more hijab and more hell and it's haram to vote and how to kill a chicken, right? That's not what this religion is about. This religion is about something much more profound, much more life-changing, much more world-changing. And you know, the idea of what we call calling the world to God, we often, again, think, oh, it means I need to make you like me, right? Like this one dear Palestinian man, I remember years ago, I was in the West Bank trying to learn Arabic. He said, oh, you want to learn Arabic? I'll teach you some Arabic. Just repeat after me. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Right? And I said, no, thank you, brother. I know what you're doing, but we're good. I'll do that when I'm ready. But can you teach me what this is? Right? But the idea is that the idea of calling the world to God is confused with, I want to call the world to me, make you like me. Right? You got to dress like me, you got to talk like me, you got to get you an Arabic name. Right? Get you some of those leather socks. You're going to feel it. No, calling the world to God. If God is justice, calling the world to God means calling the world to justice. If God is mercy, it means calling the world to mercy. If God is healing, it means calling the world to healing. Why am I calling you to me? We're as messed up as anybody else is. What, has he got some kind of magical leather socks that are going to turn you into a different person? No. So we need to wake up and understand that calling the world, before I talk about Islam, I should call you to justice. I should be calling the world to fairness. I should be calling the world to healing. I should be calling the world to feed the hungry. This is why we just get it wrong again and again and again. We say our prayers, we say Salaam Alaikum, and it's like, okay, I got it, I'm good with God. Whereas the Surah Al-Ma'un, the Surah of Benevolence, says, woe to those people who say their prayers. And some people say, no, brothers, it's not the people who say their prayers. This only refers to people who don't say their prayers. No. Let's just read the Arabic, shall we, brother? Come on. Woe to those musallim, those people who say their prayers, and yet are totally They ignore what their prayers actually mean. Those people who are doing all the right ritual things and yet neglect to urge the world to feed the hungry, they neglect to treat the orphan with compassion. They're doing all the ritual things and yet they have no rahmah in their life. Woe to them, the Quran says. These are the people who turn religion into a lie. Taqdeeb ad-din. We do this every day. We turn our religion into a lie every day. Because that's just the way it's been done. That's just the way it's been done, is the same argument that Abraham's family gave to him when he said, we got to stop worshiping like the sun and the moon. That's just the way it's been done, Abe. The Prophet Muhammad, ﷺ, it was the argument of the pre-Islamic Arabs against him. Like, this is not the way it's been done. Mo? Right? So many Muslims here in North America are like, Mo. Yeah, hey, Mo. Hey, Mo, this is not the way we've always done it. And when they chased the Muslims to the Ethiopian king, they said, look, they're not following our religion and they're not following yours either. So give them back up to us. It's not the way we've always done it. This taqleed, this fetish that we have as Muslims about always doing it the way we think it's been done is killing us. It's killing our religion and it's killing us spiritually and in every other way. When I'm working with a Muslim family or Muslim couple, often we find the right thing to do, religiously, spiritually, psychologically, everything. Like, okay, I've got a situation where I've got one abusive parent, I've got the other parent that won't leave the abusive parent, but we've got some full-grown daughters, like 20-year-old girls. Let's get the girls out of the house. Let's rent an apartment for them. We'll get help for the abusive parent. We'll get the girls, we'll get help for them, but we need to get them safe, right? And they're like, that's the Islamic thing. That's the right thing to do. And then the question always comes, well, what will the community say? Excuse me? Like, when was the last time we were like worshiping the community, right? Allah, community akbar, right? What is that? What will the community say? This is one of the worst forms of idolatry that we practice as a Muslim community, is we're always worshiping what other people might say, how other people might think, what they might say. That's not an Islamic problem. That's not a religious problem. The idea here is that in order for us to become a community of unity, we're like all about God's unity in that we're killing each other, right? Dehumanizing each other, judging each other, right? If somebody goes to if a Sunni goes to a Shia mosque, it's like, oh God, right? If somebody, if somebody goes and worships with gay, lesbian, or transgender Muslims, it's like, oh God. We're so busy judging each other and denying one another's humanity and dignity that we're preventing Islam from being what it was meant to be, and that is a transformative, restorative vehicle. If Islam is not changing us, then it's not working. If Islam is not making me a more merciful person, a more loving person, it's not working. If Islam is not making me, if my prayer is not making me more concerned about the poor and the marginalized, no matter who they are, what they believe, how they love, then it's not working. And so when I talk about this reintroduction to Islam, it's not like I've got some new information to share. It's not. This is old information. And it's information that is all around us all the time. But we are so used to doing it in a particular way, the way it's always been done, right? That we betray what this religion was actually meant to do. This religion is meant to be restoring. This religion is meant to be enabling. This religion is meant to be ennobling. This religion is meant to teach us what it means to be a real human again. And if that's not what we're here for, it's important that we just be honest about it, right? It's just important that we be honest about it. But the fact is that this religion of Islam is much more than just the sum of a few ritual parts. And it's much more than some kind of membership in a particular religious community. It's about learning to live as a restored, theocentric, and theomorphic being. So the challenge I offer myself, because I'm very much a work in progress, and the challenge I offer you is to really look into this. You know, I had a family a year ago. The parents wanted me to meet. They'd already consulted sheikhs in Egypt and sheikhs here and sheikhs there. They wanted to meet with me because their daughter went to law school. She was a great student, wonderful daughter. She went to law school and fell in love with another law student who was Jewish. And I said, whew, at least he believes in God. And they were like, no, we cut her off. The sheikh in Egypt said to cut her off. We checked with another sheikh in Pakistan, cut her off and cut her off. And I said, yeah, but like, they didn't just shack up, they're married, right? Right? No, we cut. And we just want to make sure that you agree. And I was like, well, you know, from a Quranic perspective, you know, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know, the brothers of Joseph did a lot worse than this. Right? And, like, they tried to kill them. No, we're not going to kill our brother. We're going to throw him into a well, sell him into slavery. He goes off. Like, this is bad. The people of Mecca did much worse than this. They were trying to eradicate the Muslims, kill the Muslims, stamp out the Muslims, right? And so when Joseph's brothers finally come to him in Egypt and they finally recognize who he is, it's like, he can do anything. And Joseph is Joseph. He could have done anything. Like, kill them all, off with their heads. And we're like, hey, Joseph is Joseph. But it's like, no. Forgiveness. He makes a home for them in Egypt. Wow. And when the prophet rides in to Mecca, and they're like, what will you do with us? And according to one of the traditional narrations, he immediately thought of Joseph. And he said, today I will say to you what Yusuf said to his brothers. You're free. Right? There's no blame on you. And in that moment, like, the prophet could have like cut off everybody's heads, and we would have gone, oh, yeah, it was a bad time. So he had to, it was a rough time, and extreme measures were warranted. We're all like, okay. But no, he forgave them. And in forgiving them, Mecca became a Muslim city in that moment. Like, woof. Nobody could believe it. Okay, so your daughter is now married, so honorably married, to a believing Jewish guy, who's also